Welcome back to Flatirons Tuning. We are here in the shop because it's time to talk about bypass valves. Specifically, the two different kinds of bypass valves, but no, not those two, not atmospheric and recirculating. I'm talking about the type of valves themselves, the piston style versus the diaphragm. Before we dive into it, just want to make sure you like, subscribe, hit the hype button if you see it. That helps us a ton. Make sure people can come back and see these videos. Let's talk about these bypass valves. The two different types, again, diaphragm style or piston style. What am I talking about here? Well, to design a bypass valve to function, there's really two different styles, generally speaking, which is the diaphragm style and the piston style. This is a factory bypass valve, and this is a diaphragm style. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, under this cap, there is a diaphragm, and this is where the vacuum connection goes to open and close the valve. There's a spring here that pushes down on it, and then this is a little valve. I mean, it actually kind of looks almost like the valve in your cylinder head. And this is what is closed. It holds the pressure in your intercooler, make sure that the pressure is going into your engine, and then when you shift and you come off the throttle and your manifold goes to vacuum, that vacuum pulls on this fitting, puts a vacuum at the top of the diaphragm, and then that pulls this piston up and opens it, and then that's what lets the air out through the recirc hose, basically to prevent that air from stacking up in the intercooler, starting to go backwards and push against your turbo, give you some compressor surge, all that kind of stuff that you don't want. Now this is again, just a stock STI bypass valve, and we actually have one of these. This is from Morgan's car that we cut open, so you can actually see what that looks like. So this is the rubber diaphragm, and then this is the valve that is moving up and down as you know, there's vacuum applied to it to open and close the valve. So this is the standard type, and there's definitely some benefits to this, but in the aftermarket world, there is also the other common design is something like this TurboSmart here, which is a piston style. And I'd say probably in the aftermarket, the piston styles are more common than the diaphragm styles. This is a display because it doesn't have a spring in it, so we can actually show you how this piston is going to move. So, knowing all that right up front, why are we talking about this? Well, what we want to talk about is what is the difference in function between these two types of valves, and what are the benefits to each one. And with all that, then you'll have a better idea of which one, you know, if you need to replace your bypass valve, be it atmospheric or recirculating, which is going to be the best fit for you, and some good criteria to look at. So first and foremost, the biggest benefit with the diaphragm styles is that it's a diaphragm. It's fully sealed. A lot of tuners do like these diaphragm style bypass valves because they're sealed. So if you do a smoke test on one of these valves, it's going to hold pressure. It's not going to leak any smoke. That's a big positive. And they behave very consistently because you have the diaphragm and it's sealed. You're going to know how it works every single time. Of the valves that I have up here, obviously the stock one is diaphragm style. This HKS Super Sequential, this is actually diaphragm style as well. There's not as many aftermarket diaphragm style bypass valves out there. Probably the most common one that's aftermarket that you probably know of is the Tile. Tile, it's a big valve, and the reason is because it has a big diaphragm in it, and it is a diaphragm style as well. The biggest advantage of the diaphragm style is the fact that the top section is sealed, it's going to hold vacuum, and it's going to behave very consistently. You're not going to see any leaking or anything like that from the top of the bypass valve itself. What are the disadvantages of the bypass valve? Why do so many aftermarket companies go to a piston style bypass valve? Well, the simple answer is when you have the diaphragm, you can kind of see it here, the diaphragm can only move so much. Okay, so you've got the spring pushing down on the valve, and then you have to have the vacuum pulling on the diaphragm and on the piston to open it. And so what results is that the piston only opens a little bit. So you can see here, like the opening in the stock bypass valve, it's actually pretty small. And if we start applying a bit of vacuum to this valve, which we'll show you here, the valve doesn't actually open that much. So this can be a limiting factor of how functional the diaphragm styles are. This is actually why the Tile bypass valve is so big, because the bigger the diaphragm, the more movement you can get out of the valve. And so that Tile diaphragm is so large. Well, that's how you can get a lot of air out quickly. So where you can start to run into issues with the diaphragm style bypass valves is if you're making a lot of boost pressure, and or you need to get that air out faster than you can with just the stock valve opening. HKS has a pretty creative solution to this in that depending on how much vacuum is applied to the top of this bypass valve, there's actually two different valves that can open, two different size valves. One hits the other and then opens up a larger opening. so you can evacuate more pressure out of the front here, just get it all out more quickly. So sometimes you need that for better turbo response, or if you're running into compressor surge issues and whatnot. Now, the piston style, what are the advantages of the piston style valve? Well, you can pretty clearly see it here. These piston style valves, generally speaking, they do have a spring in them that pushes down. So I can kind of push up here and you can see. But the pistons, they can move up a lot and open up a much bigger opening. There's a lot more variability with the piston style ones because of how quickly they can open. Like this is the ancient Go Fast Bits one from my WRX that, if you remember when we did the smoke test, was leaking from every possible fitting here. So definitely was sorely needed replacing. But it has two different height openings because the piston can move up so much. So basically, if you run this in the dual configuration, it opens up a little bit. Everything is fully recirculated. If it opens more, then you have some atmospheric air that's let out if that's what you want. The other advantage with the piston style too is they have most commonly an adjustment screw on top. So you can actually tighten down or loosen up the spring. So if you need faster response out of the piston, you can soften the spring up. If you want the piston to stay shut more aggressively or longer, you can tighten this down to get the response that you need. This video is brought to you by the Flatiron Tuning Pikes Peak car from 2026 Pikes Peak. This is our race car. We do the testing, development. We do a lot of stuff with this car, and we let you guys know everything we find out. So your support helps us keep coming back, keep testing things, keep trying things with the Pikes Peak car, and hopefully whatever makes us faster makes you faster. So thanks for your support. Now let's go back to the video. Let me show you what the potential issue is with these piston style bypass valves and why sometimes folks don't like them, especially because of how they behave under a smoke test. And to see that, we're going to take this vacuum pump and connect it to this old Go Fast Bits, and I will try and show you the vacuum here. But basically, as I'm starting to apply vacuum to this, the needle is just going to kind of go back close to zero. And if I get any kind of vacuum and just let it sit for any amount of time, it's just bleeding off. So this is where many of the piston style valves do not pass a smoke test because they're letting the air by. And there's a concern with these that sometimes that because they're not a really tight seal, that possibly they're not acting as quickly as they could or should, and that this might change over time, just depending, if the piston wears and so forth. So this is where there's some cause for concern around certain types of piston bypass valves. Now, as a counter to that, I'm going to show you this TurboSmart bypass valve. So if I connect this, again, this is a demo. There's no spring in it. So if I flip this over, so I'm creating pressure. If I apply pressure, piston moves right down. Okay. Then if I flip this back, and so we're going to pull a vacuum, I can pull vacuum, and it goes right back up. Now, as I'm sitting here holding this, what you'll probably notice is that the vacuum is held much more consistently with this TurboSmart bypass valve. This is why TurboSmart is one of our favorite brands if you want a piston style bypass valve, because their tolerances are just a little bit different than a lot of the other ones out there. And they have a lot of good options for bypass valves as well. So the TurboSmart design, there's like a ring. The piston is not totally flat, and it like kind of goes into a groove, like a ring. And so when it pushes in there, it's like this tolerance is just piston to wall tolerance, and then the tolerance of the piston into the seat is tighter. And so this is the kind of behavior ideally that you're looking for with a piston style bypass valve. The biggest advantage with the piston style is that they offer more adjustability typically, and you can, if needed, you can get a little bit more fast behavior out of them by softening up the spring and with the piston travel and whatnot. The other thing with the diaphragm style, the thing to keep in mind, the reason that we have this one cut open, because this was on Morgan's card, this one actually had a failure. It's a bit hard to see, but there is actually a tear in this diaphragm. And as soon as there was a single point of failure in the diaphragm, this valve no longer worked. And once that happened, then basically Morgan was having a lot of flutter issues with this turbo because the bypass valve was basically never closing. So that is the one big gotcha with the diaphragm style, is that if there's any failure at any point of the diaphragm, basically it renders the bypass valve inoperable, and then that can cause its own set of problems. Long and the short of it is they're both good. I think no matter which style you want to use, if you want to test for the seal, getting a good vacuum pump, which you probably have for bleeding brakes and that sort of thing, just put it on there and just check and make sure that the valve is holding a reasonable amount of vacuum. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% ironclad, but the tighter that it is, the better. And then just make sure that you're getting the responsiveness out of the bypass valve that you need. And if you go in with an aftermarket one, usually they will have some setup instructions, so make sure that you follow those so you can get the bypass valve calibrated correctly, which is especially important if you've got one that has the adjustable set screw, so you can adjust the spring tension. So with all that, hopefully that gives you a better idea of what the difference is between the piston style bypass valves and the diaphragm style bypass valves, and a better idea of what to look for if and when the next time you are shopping for your next bypass valve or blow-off valve. So hopefully that's helpful. Thanks very much for your support as always, and until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.